What if Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s most famous phrase, "I had a dream," was actually, "I had an idea"? Do you think his speech would have been just as effective? Do you think it would have been just as powerful? Well, according to a study conducted in 2014 by Cynthia Emmerich, the answer is no, it would not have been. I'm going to share my screen with you now, but I just want to thank you for joining me. I am Alexia Washington, and today's micro lesson is teaching diction, a demonstration of ways to help writers choose the right word. In today's lesson, we're going to examine the common causes of word choice errors, compare types of lexical errors, learn ways to address word choice errors, and then apply that knowledge using semantic feature analysis. So what came to mind when I said diction? Did you think of how we pronounce words or how we enunciate? We hear diction a lot when we're talking about music and music programs. If we're in a choir or if we're singing opera, we hear about diction. But in composition studies, when we say diction, what we are talking about or what we're discussing is word choice. What words we choose when we're trying to convey or communicate our ideas. Words are important. They're powerful. They affect the way that we interact with our family members. They affect the way that we're perceived professionally or in business when we send an email. In a 2013 intensive medical care article, researchers found that the specific words that doctors used with their patients and their colleagues and families, it impacted the way that their communication was received. It impacted if it was received as being clear and effective. It also had an impact on the way they were personally perceived, if they were empathetic or sensitive to their colleagues and patients' needs. So words are important, and that is why it's important as writing instructors and writing tutors that we help our students choose the right words, give them the tools needed to be able to choose the right words for their writing assignments. But before we can really discuss the approach on how we can empower our students to choose the right word, we need to look at some of the factors that cause or contribute to them having trouble finding the right word in the first place. Some of this could be because, or some factors could be because our students they speak English as their second language. Sometimes our students are native English speakers, but they have been accustomed to speaking a non-standard form of English. Both of these cases or both of these scenarios, our students are going to be limited in the words that they have access to, or there are going to be limits on the words that they're familiar with. So it's important that we understand that. In a 2016 article in Advances in Language and Literary Studies, researchers saw that postgraduate students, a lot of postgraduate students' papers, their scholarly writings were riddled with word choice errors. In a 2006 study on elementary and middle school students, those students had the same. These were native, or these were English as their first language speaking students. And they had issues with wrong word choices due to the wrong context, due to tone, and due to audience. These are things that we see across the spectrum. Servino and Sheeny, they conducted a study, and they were able to classify the different types of word choice errors. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to share my screen again, and we're going to look at the different types of word choice errors. The first is translation. Now, we briefly discussed that students who speak English as their second language, they might be limited in the words that they have access to or that they understand. But sometimes the problem comes because there's an expression in their native language or their first language that is not, that does not exist in English. An example that was given is full-time wife. In English, there is no expression for full-time wives. We don't have full-time wives. We don't have part-time wives. In a sense, you have to explain what you mean. There's not a label for that. Maybe there should be, but there's not. Wrong context. Errors resulting from a lack of vocabulary or incomplete knowledge of appropriate context. An example that was used in the study was a student said that someone was expelled from her home. Now in English, we don't really expel children from their homes. To be expelled or expulsion is really something that we use in the context of an educational institution. In the extreme cases, in a religious institution, you are expelled from an institution, not your home. Sin form, errors resulting from sound alike or look alike confusion. This could be affect and effect, or content and context. Idiomaticity, errors resulting from not knowing how a word fits in the entire phrase. Management needs to stand in the customer's feet is an example. We don't need you to stand in their feet. The correct thing is we need you to stand in their shoes. You can stand in someone else's shoes and get their perspective. That is an expression, an English expression. Feet and shoes are related, but they're not the same thing, and so this is a problem. Precision, using the word that is either too general or too specific for the occasion. Maybe you used vehicle when you should have said car, or used car when you should have said truck. Precision, so people understand exactly what you're saying. And then register, using words from a conversational discourse in academic prose. This also can happen where you're using casual conversation in business communication. We've all gotten that email or received that email where our colleague says, I got your last email. And what they could have said is, I received your last email. Or we've sat in a meeting where someone says, tell me more, and they could have used the word, could you please elaborate, or could you expound? These are register words, and these are problems that whether you are an English as your second language or if you are a native English speaker, a lot of us have register problems. So how do we go about fixing it? Well, Sorvino and Sheeny also have 5 approaches that they use, and that really works. It's easy to understand. Correction. As a writing instructor, you can just correct the words in the margin. We understand how that works. Or questions. An instructor asks questions about a wrong choice. Say a student used effect and they really meant to say effects. Who would put a question mark behind it? Is this really what you need? It causes the student to take a second look at the word and try to figure it out on their own. Options. Maybe the student didn't use the wrong word, but there's a better word, a stronger word. This is where I had a dream is powerful and inspiring, and I have an idea is not. Let's give them alternatives to this word. It could be examine, and the person said test, or assess is another option. Explanations. An instructor explains why one word is better than another. An example that is used in this study is students use the word explicit in place of explain. An instructor then explains that explicit is an adjective and explain is a verb. Therefore, these 2 words can't be used interchangeably, though they have similar meanings. Explanations. And lastly, error indications. This is when an instructor just writes or informs a student that there is a word error present. Now, it's very easy to say, oh, we should always give explanations to our students, or we should always ask them questions, or we should never just correct their paper. But that's not true. All of these are effective approaches. They just have to be tailored to a particular student's needs. And that's important as instructors or as writing tutors, that we understand that we need to tailor our approaches to the student's need. If your student has written a 20-page long paper and it is riddled with word choice errors, it is not going to be easy for you to give an explanation for each error. It's also not going to be helpful for them if you have 50 alternative words that they could have used. Sometimes you need to give them a correction because they just don't know the word. Sometimes you can ask a question. Other times it'd be more effective for you to offer different alternatives and give explanations. So there's ways that you can go about doing this and helping the student or empowering them to be able to take your approaches of addressing the correction and for them to find the right word for themselves. Word mapping with the dictionary. This is just getting your dictionary out and looking up what the word means. This is really the only way that you're going to really understand what that individual word means. Contextual reading. We do a lot of talking in conversational English, but that is very different from academic English, academic writing. You really have to read work from your field so you understand how words are used in your field. And lastly, you can use semantic feature analysis. Here is a semantic feature analysis matrix. As you see on the left-hand side, you see the words that are listed: see, look, watch, stare, peer, and glance. And then at the top, you see the different features, the categories. The features are at the top: use of eyes, understanding, intensity, duration, movement. So as a teacher, what you're going to do is you're going to ask your student to create this matrix and look at these individual words. Which words use eyes? Well, think all of those words use eyes. Then you're going to ask, which one of these words use understanding? See, look, watch, maybe peer. What about intensity? Well, we know that stare and glance and maybe watch and peer are intensity. What about duration? Definitely stare and glance has duration. What about movement? So you're going to ask your student these questions and they're going to look at these words. They're really only going to be able to do this if they know the definitions. So as you see, all the words have use of eyes. 3 of them have understanding. Watch, stare, peer, and glance have intensity. Stare, peer, and glance have a duration. And movement is associated with peer because in that word, peer, an object can peer as well. And it does have something to do with vision or sight. So as you see, a semantic feature analysis is very helpful in helping students being able to identify the correct word for their particular situation. So I just want to say it's important that we remember that it's not about just choosing one particular approach and going with that, or only using word mapping, or only using contextual reading. We really have to use the full approach, all the approaches available to us and all the tools available to us so that our students are equipped to be able to choose the right words for the right genre of writing for their particular fields of study.